Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 137, Fight or Flight. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the 1987 movie, The Running Man. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
New in my writing world? Nothing is new in my writing world. I was, let's see what happened. I was on a trip recently. I went to Florida for a bit. And then I also moved the week before that. So I've just been dealing with that stuff.
Yeah, you have. You've had a lot of stuff going on.
So no writing, unfortunately, yet.
Well,
Yeah.
I am excited to say that I have been doing writing stuff. So I'm really excited about that.
Excellent. At least one of us is moving forward.
As we talked about, I wanted to go back and sort of re-review my space opera series. And so I went through Apsis, and I have a question for you. I have a character in my stories which is genderless. It's science fiction. It happens.
Okay.
Up to this point, I've been calling it. But now I'm wondering if I should just go ahead and give it gender because it makes it easier for a reader to connect. And in my mind, when I imagine it, there is a slight gender influence on this character. I lean in a particular direction when thinking about the character as to a gender. And so I'm thinking about changing it to he, and I'm wondering what you thought.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how important that concept is. If like that's one of the key elements of your sci-fi is exploring what that means and what that would look like and how that plays out in society. Otherwise, I think it makes the character easier to relate to.
Yeah.
Right, if it's one way or the other.
No, it is not an element of the story. Okay, so then I think maybe dropping
that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, because I'm feeling, I think that is a good framework for it, because I'm sort of feeling the same way that in order to make this character more relatable, I think having a gender pronoun might be easier than just it. I did consider using they, and I may still do that. I am kind of just sort of bouncing it around a little bit. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I did go through the first book. First part of the book is completely edited and done, and that book is essentially ready to go, unless I do something major in the last two books that requires something to be tweaked in the first book. The first book is done. And the second book is 2/3 of the way done with the same thing. Close review, going through, tweaking anything that needs to be tweaked because of what has happened in the third book. And so when I finish that, I will be jumping into the third book. So I'm really excited. I'm hoping that will be this week.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's been a lot more fun than I expected it would be. You know, I haven't looked at these books for a while because so much has been going on. And when I got back to it, I realized, I took a break from it to do something else, and my brain was going, we have to get back. I want to know what happens.
Oh, yeah, that's the best.
I did, because I didn't remember what I did in my own story. So how hilarious is that?
Yeah, I think we all have that happen.
Let's talk about what we've encountered in books, movies, and television. Anything interesting? I
was reading Scythe.
Okay.
Which is it's a sci-fi book by, I think, Neil Shusterman is his name.
Is that Scythe?
Scythe. Yeah, like the death carries a scythe. And that's where the name comes from. It's set in a future where this artificial intelligence, like super intelligence, has developed and kind of controls everything in the world. And medical progress has advanced to where people basically don't die. It's like you get backed up to this, artificial intelligence like backs up your consciousness, and they can regrow body parts and recreate human bodies and then put the consciousness back in, things like that. So there's this group of people who, to control population, are called Scythes, and they go and they're responsible for culling parts of the population, at regular intervals. And then these two, not kids, but let's say young adults, get apprenticed to one of the Scythes, and they're like, we don't want to do this, but they get pulled into it anyway. And it's an interesting story. It's a sci-fi story. I think that's a trilogy. I've read the first two, and yeah, they're pretty good books. I'm enjoying them.
It made me think, when you were talking about it, it made me think of a fantasy series by Piers Anthony.
Incarnations of
That's the one,
Immortality.
yeah, on a Pale Horse. I think we've mentioned that before. I think we have talked about, the brain calling back to that old series before. But yeah, that's what my first thought was, when you said Death and the Scythe, I was thinking, oh, I remember that old story, which if folks haven't read The Incarnations of Immortality, they're an interesting series.
It's very
Piers
unique.
Anthony, very unique. And start with On a Pale Horse.
Have you encountered anything interesting?
Guess what? I have finished the Stormlight Archive.
So now you're caught up with part 1.
I am caught up with the first half of the first 5 books of the 10-book series.
Excellent. Yeah. You're still enjoying it?
Yeah, I did. And I can understand what people might have struggled with in the story. There's, I think, several layers of stuff that people might have struggled with, because one of the main themes is that gods and heroes are not going to save you. The way you're saved is through compassion and self-love. And for fantasy, most people are looking for gods and heroes in fantasy.
Yeah.
So I can see where that might have been frustrating for some people. I think he wrapped it up well, such that there's conclusion, but also the story is not over yet, so there's more story to be told. And I think that was well done. I feel satisfied, so that I don't feel like real eager for the next part of the story. I don't feel like I'm left hanging.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. If it was like, here's a cliffhanger, and then you got to wait 5 years.
No, I feel like that there was a satisfactory conclusion. I don't feel left hanging, but I do still feel interested in learning what's going to happen down the road.
I do wonder if. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think he did that really well. That's a kind of genius, to be able to make it satisfying, but still want to, continue the story down the road. That's, real skill.
Yeah, definitely. I do wonder if he's going to be able to keep with his release timeline now, because did you hear the news
that Apple picked up something?
Yeah, they picked up his whole Cosmere universe. They're going to be doing shows on it. I think they're starting with Mistborn. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's what they said. But they're going to be exploring, they'll have the opportunity to explore any of the stories in that Cosmere. I know they're definitely planning to do those.
It might be that this forces him to finish it sooner.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be involved. Apparently, in an unheard of agreement, he gets final say on everything.
That's great. I think that's how it should be.
Yeah, I think he was a little concerned with, recent things that happened, like, George Martin's Song of Ice and Fire. He kind of got pushed out of that, according to what we hear. Who knows the reality there? Or The Witcher, how that kind of, took a side turn. Things like that, where it's like maybe the author wouldn't have been as happy with the direction they took.
Rings of Power.
Rings of Power, yeah. So some people, may not be happy, and some people may be happy, but we'll see. I mean, it could go either way, Having the author in it could muck things up because they're not filmmakers. But I think he has a pretty good sense of things, from a high level, and distilling things down for TV and movies. I've heard him discuss adaptations and things like that. So I think he has a pretty good sense of that. And he's obviously a good storyteller. So I think, like many other people, I'm very hopeful that this could be something great. And Apple does very good work. Yeah. So I'm excited.
We've been very impressed with the Apple shows that we've watched. The other thing I actually started reading is a book called Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I think that's right, Marissa Meyer. And it's part of the Lunar Chronicles. Have you heard of it?
I think you mentioned it to me once. I haven't read it, though.
It's a take on the Cinderella story, except it's science fiction. And Cinder is a cyborg. And it's so far it's very sort of a young adult story in that it's got some young adult themes, but it's keeping me interested. It's not too angsty. I was a little worried it was going to get angsty, but it's not.
Yeah.
And the twists on the Cinderella story are interesting. Are you ready to talk about The Running Man?
Oh yeah, we're here to talk
We
about
are.
that. Yeah, let's do that.
Talking about the story told in the 1987 film The Running Man, and I'm going to read the synopsis that is available on Google. And I think this is wrong. It says in the year 2019, but I think the story actually takes place in 2017.
Yeah, that's what it said.
So I'm going to correct the review or the summary on Google as I read it. In the year 2017, America is a totalitarian state where the favorite television program is The Running Man, a game show in which prisoners must run to freedom to avoid a brutal death. Having been made a scapegoat by the government, an imprisoned Ben Richards has the opportunity to make it back to the outside again by being a contestant on the deadly show, although the twisted host, Damon Killian, has no intention of letting him escape. Did you enjoy this movie?
Yes. I was the target demographic probably for this movie when it came out. It was like the right age. I loved Schwarzenegger movies. This is one of the first Schwarzenegger movies I saw, probably, certainly in the theater. And I really enjoyed it. It definitely has a very 80s feel to it, a very Schwarzenegger kind of campy feel to it. But maybe just because I could put myself in the mindset, I fell right back into that. I could totally get back into that world. So I enjoyed it. I think story-wise, it actually holds up fairly well too. Considering the sort of cheesiness of it, they do a good job from the beginning of giving a sense of who this main character is, of Ben Richards, as you mentioned, right from the opening scene. You get a sense, okay, this guy has a moral code, and we're going to follow that journey. And it continues that way. I felt we see that character continue with that standard, right? He doesn't want to kill anyone who's not armed, for example. He doesn't let his prisoner friends go into the Running Man show in his place. So we see his character be consistent, and we get a good setup of him. We get a good setup of the world very quickly. We see Killian, and early on we know it's like, oh, this is the bad guy you love to hate. He's just like this, I don't know, charismatic, sort of smarmy. I don't know what the right word is, but he's set up really well. We're introduced to, I think her name is Amber, and again, it's like she fits into the plot pretty quickly. And then I like that she realizes something's fishy with what's going on with the official story, despite the fact that she's basically a cog in the machine and she's bought onto the lies and the propaganda. We see her start to change her mind and wake up to what's going on and see the propaganda for what it is. And then we get to see that, the conflict when she sees Ben Richards again, she gets thrust into the Running Man game, and he's upset, but he gives her a second chance, which I think is also a good message. Like, hey, I know you were buying the lies, but now you've woken up, so we're on the same side. So I liked all of that. I thought the pacing was pretty good throughout. I was impressed, particularly at the beginning, about how quickly we're introduced to the world and the characters in the story. It's a pretty tight script from that perspective. And then, once you get into the action, here's another stalker that we got to take out, right? It's a little repetitive there, maybe, but I appreciated that the action scenes weren't just, here's another car chase, here's another foot chase, here's another shootout. It's like they're actually different, and it was entertaining to see how they set up those different characters, even if it was a little I don't know, maybe cartoonish. It still was a nice break from what I feel has become kind of bland action movie tropes. So it was good to see those. And this was back then. I feel like, modern movies could learn from some of this, making things different, feel different. So I like that. And then I loved when Ben Richards goes through all this work and he returns and he gets to put Killian in his place. That was a very satisfying conclusion there. One thing is, sadly, this movie feels kind of relatable in the modern world, right? With an increasing sensational stories that we see in news and in media and reality shows with and becoming more desensitized to violence. I feel like that's kind of what this movie was pointing out in a way. And it's kind of like we're here in a sense, almost. So it's kind of weird watching this again, seeing like 2017. Oh, you're off by 10 years maybe. But there's definitely stuff that's still relatable, even though it's a bit cheesy in places and times. I mean, it has, it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie of that era, and it's got his one-liners and stuff like that. So you kind of have to accept that stuff and enjoy it for what it is, or you'll be turned off by it. So for me, I thought it was great. I really liked it. I thought it was fun. I thought it still holds up pretty well. What about you?
I enjoyed the movie more than I expected to, because I too saw it back in the 80s when it came out, and I have seen it since then, and I have always thought it was a little too violent, which may be the point that you're trying to raise, but I always, felt that, okay, always felt a little gratuitous to me. But one of the things that I thought was absolutely fascinating is it's very tricky when you're predicting the future in science fiction. And, there's so many examples of, like in The Matrix, AI takes over the world and there's the battle in I don't know when it was, 20 something, not too long ago. Or like Star Trek, right? Which the original series Star Treks constantly have things happening like in 1999 and stuff like that, which of course doesn't happen because nobody can predict the future. So of course they can't. But it was really fascinating to me what they did get right. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Like when he's in her apartment and he's setting up the trip to Hawaii. That's the internet.
Yeah.
You click on the computer and you say, buy me a ticket to Hawaii, and you buy a ticket to Hawaii from your computer. So they got that right.
I didn't even catch that. Yeah, you're right. Because it's so ubiquitous now, I didn't even think about it.
Yep. And turn on the lights. You walk in, you just ask your whatever to turn on the lights. They don't make coffee and toast yet, but that probably is coming. They vacuum their floor for you.
Yeah.
So, they got that right. So there was a lot of stuff that I was kind of impressed how they got right, and very interesting what, they didn't. But again, when you're predicting the future, it's just guessing. You can go ahead and project as logically as you want. And I don't think they even bothered with that. I think they just had fun with it.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that amazed me too was, and I thought of this not upon rewatching the movie, but when we started having this ability where you can map people's faces onto other people's actions.
Oh,
As we started developing AI, I was like, oh, you can do that thing that they did in Running Man, where just make someone else do something and you can't tell the difference. And
so they predicted deep fakes.
Yeah, deep fakes. Exactly. Yep. We're there now.
The other thing that I thought, and that kind of goes towards my point of having fun, because this is really the point of this movie. This movie is to have fun. This is just pure entertainment. It's pure Arnold Schwarzenegger, over-the-top entertainment. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a scene where Killian has talked to his people. The show is over. I'm not sure why the audience was still there. That was a little bit of a continuity thing that I didn't understand. But the show, they've quote-unquote killed Richards with the deep fake.
Yeah.
And the show is over. And he's standing talking to his people, and there's a television behind him that's rolling credits. If you haven't already done this, you need to stop and read the credits. They're hilarious.
That's great. I don't remember seeing that.
The makeup is done by Paint Your Face. And it's very funny. And colorizing is done by Red G Blue.
That's
hilarious. It's very funny. We liked a lot about this movie. Are there any things that we might have changed as an author?
Yeah, sure. Before I do that, I just wanted to know one other thing. I think people the younger generations couldn't appreciate one aspect of this movie, which is Richard Dawson as Killian, the bad guy. Now you'd have no context for that, but he was like very well known back then for being like the host of Family Feud.
He was beloved.
Yeah, and to see him in this movie as a bad guy was just so good. It was just so well done. He played such a great character.
It was a wonderful sort of twist on the expectations of who he was supposed to be, because he was essentially playing himself, just nefarious.
Exactly. It was awesome. Okay, so how would I improve this? I mean, I kind of have to look at it from two different perspectives. Like if I was doing something like this today, I probably wouldn't have, a lot of the cheesiness, the 80s Schwarzenegger lines where, he's doing the one-liner jokes and things like that. They're fun, but they kind of take you out of the movie. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm watching a Schwarzenegger movie, which back then, like that's part of the reason you went to see these movies. So if I was writing this for Arnold Schwarzenegger, I absolutely would not have taken those out. I would have had lines like those in there for sure, because that was the thing. But now, for modern sensibilities, I either wouldn't have that at all, or I have a lot less of that. I think I would take it more seriously, because I think the messages, the themes, and the sense of danger that you could instill would be a little bit stronger, if you took it more seriously. So that's one thing. And then kind of like our discussion of the island, if you remember that, I would have liked a little more resolution to see how the world was affected more broadly, if it was affected more broadly. And even if not that, make a more specific resolution for his character. So there's something that happens fairly early on in the movie, right? When he escapes from the prison camp, he goes to see his brother and then promptly forgets all about him, right? The brother becomes completely irrelevant and never mentioned again for the whole rest of the movie. But I think you could take that, have some follow-up with that, and give that character a little bit additional motivation for him to maybe he wants to get out. And when he gets out, he's going to go rescue his brother from whatever re-education program he's been sent to. So that gives you some conflict with his internal motivations of, at the end, does he go to rescue his brother? Or does he stay and continue the fight here and risk dying and leaving his brother in jeopardy wherever he's at? I think you could have had that moment at the climax where he has a tougher decision to make. And then at the end, in the resolution of the story, he gets reunited with them or something like that. So I might have woven that in a little bit more, since it was kind of just a lost thread that was brought up and then forgotten about. And I think it could have tightened up the climax and the resolution a little bit. So those are the things that I saw. What about you? Do you agree with any of that? And what would you have changed?
I do agree with that. And I actually appreciate you raising how satisfying it would be to have a resolution, because one of the things that I was kind of hooked on, and I didn't realize it was a need for a resolution until you just said what you said. And that is, okay, so they stopped a game show host on a television channel, but all of these prisoners are being sent by the Department of Justice, which are the guys with the guns. How do they move forward from there? And that's something that was niggling in the back of my mind, is that particular really big thread. It's a huge thread to the happily ever after of our hero that was really not addressed. So I think that you're correct. Some kind of, it could have been even in the closing credits, where you see them running around trying to stop the Justice Department, or you see him free his brother or something, where there's not even necessarily any dialogue. It could just be reports, like news reports or something that shows what they were continuing to do. And I think that you're absolutely correct. That would have made it a little bit more satisfying. The other thing that kind of bothered me the most, though, was I was watching this with a critical eye, which, as we said earlier when we started talking about this movie, this is a movie for fun. So it's probably best not to watch it with a critical eye. But I did. And I would have really liked to have had a little bit more world building done, because some of the sort of history and culture in place didn't make sense to me. And I would have loved to have had just a little bit more to give it some more depth. This was a plot-driven movie. It was not a character-driven movie. And I think it was also a plot-driven movie and not sort of like a world-building movie at
Yeah.
all. But I still would have liked just a little bit more, just to give it a little bit more depth instead of it being real surface. And for example, a couple of things that sort of stood out to me. At the very last scene, where you're sort of pulled back and you're looking at the skyline of Los Angeles, and it's a very different skyline than what it had been 30 years before. And there was one point where it said that there was the Great Quake in 1997.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, so how did they rebuild so enormously in 20 years, but still have piles of wreck at the prison facility in Wilshire, where like Arnold is walking around carrying an I-beam? It didn't make sense to me. How did we get from there to here? And
Yeah.
I would have liked just a little bit of that. It could have been, that could have been like the beginning opening credits, because the opening credits were actually quite simplistic.
Yeah.
And so I think something like that along were kind of, we kind of, and they gave us a scroll, but I think maybe some visuals of how we got from America in 1987 to America in 2017, and a totalitarian state and an entirely different skyline of Los Angeles, which I know it sounds like I'm kind of hung up on something, but it just is an example of how they just sort of threw it in to make it feel future and sci-fi. Yeah. But I would have liked it to have a little bit of substance. And I know it's a small thing. Again, this is a movie that is supposed to be fun. So for whatever that's worth.
I agree with that. But I think that would have added to the fun and the coolness of the world, seeing that set up. And then, especially if you saw elements of that, like, oh, look, here's this, building that was destroyed. And, obviously from the quake that they mentioned, which, by the way, they're pretty close with that quake prediction.
So did you pull any themes from The Running Man?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously stuff going on here. I think you said it's not really a character-driven story, and I think that's true. I think it's, this is a vehicle for Schwarzenegger to do some action, have his fun one-liners, give us a little sci-fi world. But I think there is some character growth going on. It's obviously not the huge focus of the story, but it's there. If we look, like Ben Richards, once he escapes and he wants to go find his brother, basically he just wants to get away, right? And then once he's caught and he just wants to survive the game and get out. He's not really interested in their fight or their politics. But then ultimately at the end, he ends up, leading the charge and becoming a sort of hero in his own right. And his fight and his victory ultimately wins the audience over to his side and to the side of truth. So I think that's kind of pointing us to what the larger message is, which I got. It's always worth fighting for the truth. So that's the theme I got out of it.
Well, that's good. I like that. And I was kind of focusing more on sort of the overwhelming sort of message of what we're seeing over and over again, is that it's important to choose right over might. So we see that at the very beginning with Richards refusing to shoot unarmed civilians.
Yeah.
And we see that with the underground trying to stop the network from brainwashing everybody in this totalitarian state. So it's a very obvious theme that sort of is the underpinning of like all the storytelling. So I ran with that one, right over might.
Yeah.
So, if you had anything you wanted to take away from The Running Man as a writer, what would it be?
I think for me, I'm going to take away that it's okay to be a little goofy sometimes, as long as the story still works. Make sure it tonally makes sense, but you can get away with that. Have fun. I don't think that's core to this movie or what it's about, but I'm just trying to come up with something different for a writing takeaway this time. So that's what I got.
Yeah. And I took away, I think, just even a minimal amount of world building just to make it feel cohesive is good, even when you have something that is meant to be sort of fun and fluffy.
Agreed.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about the 1987 film, The Running Man. A huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. If you want a story that carries some of today's vibe, Consider checking out Michael's young adult fantasy novel, The Golden Scarab of Ballyhar, an enchanting quest that will captivate readers who love magic, wonder, and a dash of humor. Link is in the show notes. The Stories Told podcast is on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, subscribers can drop a note on our YouTube channel. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in The Running Man 2025. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.